way of managing this morning. So I hope you guys are up for that and you've had your coffee, etc. Right, now I'll introduce Colart Miles. Colart Miles is an innovation expert in New Zealand, and although he's in New Zealand now, has really been around the whole world and has worked in, obviously he was born in Africa, has worked in the US, in Europe, and as well as New Zealand, across a whole range of industries, too many for me to even remember or name, but really all in the field of business design. Colart would call himself a business designer by trade. Computer science, he has an MBA, and he's now the founder and runs a company called Velux Industries, who are specialists in lean and agile systems and processes and helping companies become more nimble. They work an awful lot with Zealand Innovation, which is a pretty big name in New Zealand innovation, and they run the innovation. What's it's
called Driving Innovation.
The Driving Innovation course for them.
So the word innovation a lot.
Yeah, innovation's a really great word, and it's written over there as well. So not many people in New Zealand who are more savvy when it comes to agile thinking, lean thinking, and business innovation and flexibility than Colart Miles. So would you please join me, guys, in welcoming Colart to Wellington?
Thanks.
Thanks, mate. Good to have you here.
Andy.
Right, so why don't we kick off with a bit of your, I won't call it a checkered past, but your varied and interesting past. Do you want to just talk us a little bit through that?
That's a lot kinder. Born and raised in sub-Saharan Africa. Family history is Rhodesian Zimbabwean, so not quite. It's a little bit like going up to that strange accent that you hear around here and saying, "Hey, are you from Australia?" No, mate, I'm from Kiwi. I'm a Kiwi, man. So similar sort of dynamic. Spent a lot of time in South Africa growing up, but also as a family we were quite nomadic.
Right.
And then joined the South African military. Was conscripted at the time.
Right.
And one of the last to be conscripted. Spent some time serving on the submarine service in South Africa. Bet you guys didn't know we had one.
It's the thing about submarines, isn't it? You never know they're there.
Swear it. Last of the U-boat design, interestingly enough. So 27-year-old boats. They took a lot of people power to keep those things functioning and operational.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot of lessons out of that. And then from there, like you say, a long meandering path that kind of brings me to New Zealand. New Kiwi, got here about 8 years ago, absolutely loving it and in love with my new country.
Yeah, great. Okay. And so how did you get into coaching? Because Velux Industries is a coaching business, first and foremost.
Yeah, sorry, the company name is Velux Innovation. So you're going to hear the word innovate. I apologise in advance, right? If anyone's doing that kind of bingo thing where they go, they have to go tally, it's probably going to stack up quite a lot by the end of the talk.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So Velux Innovation was brought about as a result of a conversation with Callaghan. So I don't know if you guys know much about Callaghan Innovation. It was a government agency that was set up, and really their mandate is to shift the needle on innovation in New Zealand. So kind of recognise that we're kind of falling behind the rest of the world in a lot of ways, and there are some big changes coming, big challenges coming to our little shores, and a lot of them are actually here already. And so there's a sort of recognition that part of the answer to staying fit and being able to thrive in that kind of environment means you need to develop better business disciplines around change and adapting. So Velux Innovation was born out of a conversation with Callaghan. They said, look, can you talk to us about how we might bring agile practices, agile and lean? We see a lot of magic over there. How can we bring that to life in the innovation subject? We've got product development going on, especially with some of our high-value manufacturing and complex product development companies. A lot of them could do with a little bit of thinking and frameworks that we could put to use on the ground, make it really practical and lightweight. Okay. And so we said, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
And in true sort of experimental fashion, we ran a pilot and was deemed really successful for the impact that we had, but we always had an eye on a few things that we could improve.
Yes.
And so the original pilot was 3 months, worked with a company called PowerShield in Auckland. And from there, we adapted and evolved the program, and is now a 12-month substantial in-business coaching program.
Right.
We kind of get in more at the sort of team and function level.
Yeah.
We kind of have a touch point with the exec, but it's more kind of building that capability into the middle of the organisation and helping that sort of speed up and adopt some of these practices.
Okay, so it's less of sort of come to a workshop once a month and more inserting yourself into individual businesses.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to describe it. We think of it as mentored learning or sort of in-business coaching. It's like we're not consultants that throw opinions in, and we're also not do-it-for-you contractors. We're sort of somewhere on the edges. We go, hey man, so here's an idea, maybe run a workshop, do a bit of experiential stuff. If anyone's been in one of those sort of agile lean workshops, there's a lot of real practical exercises that you can do to bring some of the stuff to life. And we go, okay, well, was that interesting enough to want to try it? How about we sit with you and we'll actually help you process something inside your business to make a change? And we'll be with you through that journey, you know. And so that's where we've enjoyed the best results. You know? Like experiment and see what actually works on the ground in your business.
Okay. And does that vary widely? What works for different businesses?
Oh, absolutely. It's like snowflakes. Each business has its own set of characteristics and dynamics, and so I don't think that you can have a general formula that you can apply to any situation. But the trick is to apply a process that can surface the formula that works the best in that scenario. And that's where agile techniques sort of come in very handy. They help you work on the delivery model. It's a method for deriving a delivery model. All
right. Tell us a bit about, you mentioned that New Zealand is falling behind a wee bit and we're facing a few challenges. Can you talk a bit about those?
Yeah, it's probably a sticky subject. But so Callaghan Innovation has done a lot of research and they monitor this very closely. It's part of their mandate.
Right.
And really I'm getting my data from Callaghan, and they sort of suggested that if you had to plot New Zealand businesses on a scale of innovation, and we said, look, on this end of the scale, we've got latent. All right. So this means we're kind of not really doing enough to even keep the lifespan of the business model that we've got. There's sort of in the middle, you might call that sustaining. This is, we're just dropping enough features and product enhancements and product drops to extend the life of our business model in its current form. And then there's disruptive, which would be those sort of moonshots, you know, like we're experimenting with wildly different models to help us detect which one might be substantial enough to put some weight into, and then we kind of move through. So if you had to plot New Zealand businesses across a scale like that, the lump unfortunately is sitting on the latent to sustaining side. There's not a lot of businesses, unfortunately, that are doing the disruptive stuff.
Right.
And really, you know, if you think about sort of Xero and, you know, Vend as a point of sale software as a service company, there's a lot of business models that are emerging now that could change our whole economy. You know, Sir Paul Callaghan, he did this amazing acceptance speech at Massey University for one of their degree convocations, and I was just so inspired, man. He talked about where New Zealand is, and he gave some really realistic. His hands up as who's actually seen that. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? I've got one in the corner there. We might share that link out. It's actually really worth it, just for Kiwis to reflect, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's the thing he sort of puts out there as well. All we need is about 3 or 4 of these, you know, billion-dollar sort of scale-ups, these exponential businesses, and it would change our economy. Absolutely, you know.
So why do you think there are then a few? Because, you know, you always hear that, you know, New Zealand Ness is based on the fact that we're at the arse end of the world and we've had to be resourceful and come up with our own ways of doing things and that sort of thing, which should lend itself to being a highly innovative business economy as well. Why do you think that we're not?
That's a really, really good take, and I hear a lot of commentary about this. I've probably got my own opinions, but the one I think works best is, you know, play to our strengths. There are a lot of strengths in this little island. Geography is becoming less of an issue, don't you think? I've seen a lot of nods around the room.
It's almost an advantage now, isn't it?
It's a massive advantage, man. So I think one of the plays that I've seen that works really well is companies, and they are doing this, perhaps on the quiet, are using New Zealand as a sandbox. You know, Google's Loon project, South Island, you know, this is well under the radar on the global radar, but it's a pretty groundbreaking and, you know, potentially world-changing piece of technology there. And that's just one example of, and I know in the networks, many. Where you know, New Zealand has this unique advantage of being one of the most demographically analysed populations in the world. So we've got the most demographic data, apparently per, you know, kind of per capita, but also longitudinal as well. So there's you know, an awful lot that acts in our favour here that we're sitting with. And I think there are a few sort of stigmas that tend to play out. I mean, I've been here for 8 years. It was a lot worse 8 years ago, and I can see it getting better. But one of them that tends to come up from time to time is the tall poppy syndrome. You know, and there's the other one is And we see this in our coaching work as well. We kind of start working with a business, and the appetite for, kind of changing the game and doing things really radically different and kind of going that disruptive end of the scale is not so much there.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
that often when it's owner-founder operating the business, it's tough enough keeping your head around and keeping this thing going. How do I do that? And I live and die by results here. How do I do that and then think about changing the game altogether or changing that opening up that next chapter. So that's a real dilemma, and sometimes they call that, I've heard it referred to as the beach batch barbecue sort of thing. It's like, whoa, I've got a lifestyle here. But I think there's a lot of sense in that because, you've got to maintain some degree of balance. So that's
the size of aspiration of New Zealand businesses is potentially getting bigger, but traditionally hasn't been as big. What do you guys think about the tall poppy thing? I hear people talk about this all the time, and whether or not it's waning and disappearing in New Zealand, or whether it's still around. Anyone got any view on that?
I'd never heard of it when I came to Wellington, but I have friends outside of New Zealand, outside of Wellington, who think it's really still prevalent.
Really? Interesting.
But I don't notice it here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. I heard recently Andy Hamilton, who you probably know, runs the Ice House, and he's very firm on the idea that New Zealand has always had lots of sporting heroes, and we don't really, drag down Richie McCaw or Jonah Lomu, but in the other fields, we desperately need more business leaders and businesses and companies that are prepared to put their head above and go, we're out there succeeding on the world stage like your Zeros. We don't have enough of those sort of attitudes as sort of role models, I suppose. Sorry, mate, did you have a question?
A comment on the tall poppy syndrome. I noticed that a lot of medium companies are very shy about articulating their business strategy. And I thought, why would that be? And I think it may be tall poppy syndrome. If somebody comes along and says, I'm going to do this and I know how I want to do this, and I think they're just afraid to kind of get into that space.
Yes, I think
that there's a risk with having a tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that psyche does seem to be changing. But we desperately need more people, and people like you need to be boosting up these people, don't we?
Absolutely. Platforms like this, that gives the introverts sometimes the real visionaries, but that give them the chance to express and build their own confidence and being able to share that story and realize that there's actually not a lot of bad things. There's a lot of good things can happen out of that sort of thing. Michelle Dickinson talks about that quite a bit, actually. I really appreciate some of the stuff that she's put out there around being respectful of that kind of introverted sort of side of things. Introvert, extrovert. Extrovert is somebody who draws their energy by being around other people. Introvert draws their energy from within, so they need time offline to kind of charge up in that. So very often, and the advice that she gave, which I thought was really awesome, is, if you've got if you've got something that you want somebody to do, or you've posed a question and you need a comment or to share some ideas on it, so often it helps to give the person a chance to just process that and time to kind of go away and come back again with an answer on it. And often you get really great quality insight out of that sort of thing. And I wonder if that plays into some of that tall poppy syndrome stuff. Is we sometimes jump the gun. We're not too keen, I think, as a culture here, to just shoot our mouths off about things, and I actually think that's a strength. There's awful, you just have to watch the political stuff going on in the States to kind of know that that's not us, man.
No, that's right. The Australians are more like the Americans. So how many companies would you help through Callaghan Innovation in a year? If you're going inside a number of businesses, it must be quite tough, isn't it?
It depends. We're fine-tuning all the time, but I think our capacity at the moment is around 15 to 20 per year.
Wow.
That we'll take through a one-year program, launching at different points, if you kind of think of it like that.
So they're all established businesses of a sort of...
Tend to be, yeah. We started with a spectrum, and we thought, actually, we're going to test a few theories. We're going to eat our own dog food and experiment. And we thought we'd try a few really small companies that are just sort of forming, and maybe they're at that scaling stage where they go, wow, we've just got this amazing contract overseas. We are being asked to do what we do now, but 10,000 times more. Let's do it, ride that curve. So we've got a few companies that are on that end of the spectrum, and then we've got companies that are really at the other end of the spectrum. They're like top dogs in their sector, and they've been like that for a long time, but they've just started to see the early signs of disruption. So that would come through as, look, our business is B2B, and our client leaned over the table one day and said, what are you doing to innovate? What are you doing to bring value to the transaction? We've been doing this for years, But, frankly, I found out the other day that I can get this direct from somewhere else for a lot cheaper. What's that margin? Can you justify that margin for me? And they're like, what? I can just imagine walking out of a room like that and the whole world's just shifted in that one question.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's the kind of thing that, companies on the other end of the scale as well that are kind of sitting pretty, that's a good time to actually get a little lab going to experiment with different models.
Disruptive or end up being disruptive.
And don't do it while you're in that kind of stress. Never try to innovate while you're under stress and under fire.
Yeah, right.
It's like, although that sort of adds the crisis. Sometimes you need a bit of crisis.
Pressure makes
diamonds. Pressure makes it. Yeah.
Crushes coal as well, apparently. Yeah. Just a question here that relates to that. Do you think only startup businesses can be truly disruptive? What advice can you give to established businesses to combine innovation with a commitment to its shareholders and customers who might want us to take fewer risks? I'm sure you come up with that a lot in terms of governance.
What a great question. There's so many facets to it. I think the simple answer is, my short answer would be absolutely yes. Big companies can and need to build this. It is not impossible. You've actually got the benefit of all these startup communities going mad around you. You can bring that kind of thinking into your business. You can bring it close. You can interact with it, lean into it. So there's no shortage of that. There's simple, lightweight frameworks and techniques, people that are practiced in those, that are always looking for a day job while they get their side hustle on. So there's a lot of ways to inject that startup thinking into your business if you kind of embrace it a bit more. B, you need leadership support. At that sort of both the board and the exec level. Traditionally, I think this is probably one of the issues that Institute of Directors has sort of highlighted is, we've got this sort of cycling downhill sort of mentality. A lot of our boards don't reflect the customer bases that we're operating in. And especially if we're pursuing opportunities in China and that sort of thing, you need to start getting that sort of diversity of thinking on your boards. So that, kind of starts to kind of build its way down again. Takes a whole village to raise a child, in other words. Board level stuff. Just as a comment on that, the board's traditional responsibility is to protect value in the business, protect the interests of the company. I think that needs to be extended, or one part that's part of their role as well is to grow value. So that's something to reflect on as a board is, what are you doing to grow value or to foster growth in your business, which means a different type of relationship with your senior management, right? So traditionally it's adversarial or a challenge one. So I have to keep you honest. Our board is here to keep you honest. And
I know it well.
You know it well? Oh, mate. And I think there's a dimension to that needs to go, right, that's businesses, that's keeping the lights on, that's keeping the existing model running, that's great. What are you doing to grow the business? What help do you need? And that's a different dynamic. It's adversarial moves to collaborative. Then it says, what are we doing to explore these different... Because if you don't have a collaborative frame around that sort of growth question, what you end up with is more gaming, more distortion, more fantastically successful projects that didn't actually yield any real outcome, but spent a lot of money in. But everybody's, it's a success, and we're not really able to be truly honest about the impacts that we're generating.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make, I think, about that governance and this idea about taking fewer risk or risk mitigation within the governance structure. And I'm sure you run into that a lot. I'm sure everyone here has seen that a lot. And one of the speakers yesterday, I think it was talking about the fact that innovation can't come from an innovation department, or it can't come from a process, or, and I imagine that there's a tendency from governance to go, yes, we do need to do some new things and some growth things, so let's create a little thing here and spend a little bit of money on that, and then we can sort of siphon it off and reduce the risk or the effect of it, risk of it infecting the rest of the business. Do you see that?
When's the best time to test a new aeroplane wing design? In the air with 500 people in it? Probably not, right?
No.
Under controlled conditions, in a wind tunnel, that sort of thing, right? So it's the same kind of philosophy as treat the risk, manage the risk properly, but don't stifle it. Don't stifle the creativity in it. I've actually got a slide that I wanted to show that's to that effect. Is that okay? I'll just pop it on quickly.
Absolutely, mate.
So I saw a TED talk a little while ago and it resonated really strongly. Is that too dramatic? Great acceleration. Has anyone sort of heard the fourth industrial age stuff?
Yes.
We might come back to that, but I just wanted to pop one on here. This one here. So what she talked about was the difference between a scout mindset and a soldier mindset. So this really resonated well with an ex-sailor like me. And basically the principle was that many businesses were in soldier mode. We're attacking, defending or protecting a market share.
Right.
We're there to try and win more customers, kind of keep a guard on the competition, and we're managing a lot of variables. There's a live and die by results sort of stuff. So that would be sort of more the soldier mindset. And what she was advocating for was, look, most conventional militaries will have something called a scout function, right? What's its job to do? Its job isn't to engage the enemy. Its job is to go and learn as much as possible. And that's the kind of advice I wanted to land in the room is if you want to tackle this sort of thing called innovation, it really comes down to cultivating that scout mindset as a useful way to think of it and separating it out. So like the one lens that we're looking through is soldier, attack, defend, feel upset if we don't get the result we want, right? Scout mindset's totally different. It says, attack 3 ways, change the formula up, success, success, fail, fail, success. Cool. Reward, learn.
Yep.
We've got a learning out of that,
Yep.
Lightweight, less ego investment, more scientific, more methodical, more disciplined around it.
Right.
But being able to accelerate the number of experiments, so you bring the cost of experimenting down with the scout mindset.
Okay.
So we're not deploying the whole freaking army to some crazy cause to try something out. We're sampling, we're testing, we're doing the binoculars thing.
Yep. Testing.
So that was one of the most useful things that sort of landed for me. Is that sort of useful for you guys? I'll share the link around. The TED Talk is really good behind this. But really it helps with that squiggly line stuff, Claudia Batten talks about the squiggly line. I love that.
Does she?
Yeah.
Right.
So as a life journey. But I think that's really a good analogy for the innovation process. It never looks, how many real breakthroughs actually came from a straight line. First we, the funnel cone of uncertainty. Then we did the business case and we reduced the uncertainty by another 10% with $6 million, and then until eventually it popped out the other end and it broke through. No, it's more like something wandered in drunk. All right.
But that's so common. I mean, last decade I was involved in innovation and new product development, and it was very much like that. It was a gated, step-by-step process. We're going to go and innovate now, and we're going to do some research. We're going to learn. We're going to do this, that, and the other thing. Yeah.
And how'd it go?
Well, not too bad. Probably could have gone an awful lot better. Yeah.
Interesting.
Does that resonate with you guys? That scout mindset sort of idea? Is it something you see within your businesses, or not so much? Bunch of soldiers here, maybe.
Yeah, well, this is the sort of challenge of our times, right? That back to that other slide about the great acceleration. This is a sort of singularity university slide, but there's a lot of big changes happening, right? We are in a phase of what we call the great acceleration. Actually, people keep coming up with names for it. We really just don't know what's going to happen next, but it's pretty exciting, right? And it's brought about by the maturing of interconnected, and digital will be one of the components of this, but it's also social, right? And I think I had a case study. Would you like to? Would you guys be interested in the case study? The Pokemon Go one, was that recent enough?
What's Pokemon Go?
Pokemon Go.
No,
What's Pokemon Go? Actually, I was watching the news this morning, and Samsung's pulled all of their Galaxy Notes. They've stopped production, haven't they? Nodding along.
Yeah, I said turn them off immediately, haven't they?
I could have done that. I could have done this. This is basically the market cap over time for Nintendo.
Okay.
But I could have done this morning if I had enough time.
Right.
For Samsung, and they've also had a bit of a market cap fluctuation as a result of pulling this handset back, which is got lots of issues. But they've got to preserve their reputation, and they're going to recover from that. We know. But these are the kind of tumultuous changes that can happen, and they really change everything for that business.
Very hard to predict, I guess.
Very hard to predict. Even harder to respond to. So this is a case study. Imagine being Nintendo's board on July the 6th or July the 7th over there, or July the 6th, American notation, and noticing that the stock price was just skyrocketing, right? Within about 4 or 5 days, they went from 14.6 billion to 41 billion. So that's more than, what's that? That's more than double your. It was actually more than double your the value of your business basically within about 5 days. And they were like, "What the hell is going on? Somebody please tell us." And they went, "No, it's because Pokemon Go was launched, and within about 72 hours, Pokemon Go as an app on smartphones has reached more daily users than Twitter. It's it's accelerated to this point within 72 hours."
Yeah.
Like, what? All right, and the market went nuts, and they thought, "Whoa. Nintendo's doing something crazy. We better get in there now while it's hot, right?" And of course, can anyone sort of guess what happened at this peak here?
Lots of people sold their stock.
Yeah, why would they sell, I wonder? Well, actually, the short answer is they came to their senses, and somebody actually did some due diligence and went, who actually owns Pokemon Go? Oh, Nintendo doesn't own them. So that's the point when the market realized that Nintendo owns a 30% stake in the company that actually owns Pokemon Go. Okay. And so that corrected, so the market had to correct their position, and of course, but it still left Nintendo way up, right? So they did really well out of that. But this is like can you imagine that roller coaster ride they must have gone through, man?
Absolutely. so that's a great example. How would you imagine that worked out for Nintendo, that 30% stake in what would have been a very tiny little startup that was just let's just throw some money into something that may be highly disruptive and see if it works?
There's a company called Niantic, but they've got a long history with Niantic, right?
Okay.
The evidence speaks for itself. They've ended up well up as a result of that.
Yeah.
But again, we don't know how sustainable that is.
No.
But I think what is really interesting is the factors that were in place, the environmental conditions that created the spike. Would it have been there if we had if we didn't have prolific smartphone use? Would it have been there if there was a generation of 90s kids that had been, indoctrinated with Pokemon? It's a cartoon, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. So there was a couple of factors that sort of came together and bam, it created this dramatic result. And I guess what the reality for me was, what that is a reminder for me, why it's significant is these changes can happen, they call them exponentially. So these changes can happen really quick and broad and deep and flash. They're fast, whap. And as fast as they happen, they can change again.
Yeah.
So how do we, as a business, what does this sort of mean for New Zealand businesses when the world around you, the business environment that you're operating in, is growing more turbulent and the changes are more exponential? They're bigger, more prolific than that they happened before.
Yeah.
So it makes it very challenging to stay fit in an environment where it's kind of constantly changing. Yeah.
One of the things, we had Kyla last night from Singularity University talking, and I was really interested in that idea of exponential curves, and how, if that's the case, and she mentioned 3D printing having been around for 35 years and it's finally taken off, and a number of different examples. If that's the case, it should be possible to predict, because the next big thing is potentially things that have been around for a long time, right?
That's such a good question. I actually wish I got the picture now, but I saw something come up as a meme in my Facebook feed, and it had a picture of 6 garages, the garage doors. And I went, this is the garage of Google, this is Microsoft, this is Apple, 6 garages.
Yeah.
And I sat there reflecting back at the time when those pictures were taken. I wonder how many other garages were being worked on.
Yeah.
And that's the trick, right? True. As they're hidden in there with thousands of other startups, all operating out of their garages, all enthusiasts, some of them looking great and they're not looking so great. So it's kind of this. Yeah, so I guess that's part of the story, is to kind of widen the perspective and go, the one or two that might make it exponential, they're very difficult to see in the noise of everything else.
Yeah.
So it helps to, in my opinion, make experiments.
Try as many different things as possible.
Absolutely.
Because I'm sure everyone wants to know how you become those one or two garages out of 1,000.
Absolutely, yeah. Double your rate of innovation, double your rate of learning would be one answer.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's a few of those,
Okay. All right. I'll just take a couple of questions from the floor. Do your coaching methods and practices only suit private companies, or do you also apply it to government bodies, or can you?
We haven't taken on any direct government clients, although we have coached into the R9 accelerators. Anyone heard of the R9 accelerator? Results 9, Martin? Awesome. Yeah, so this is a government initiative where they're experimenting with an accelerator format. So they're saying 3 months, let's take some challenges that we feel in government, and we'll put them through this 3-month period where we wrap around a cross-functional team that's made up of civil servants who know the problems domain really well, and perhaps 1 or 2 entrepreneurs that can think differently and maybe hack the problem and find different ways of doing it. So the guerrilla warfare sort of thing, right?
Yep.
And send them off to scout out a different future and kind of bring back, okay, what did they learn about understanding how to solve that problem in maybe novel ways. And I think that's a good example of how this sort of thinking can be applied to
Almost anything.
to government, I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm interested within the businesses you sort of insert yourselves into.
Yes.
You know, the old Intel example of where they sent their best people off to a different building in a different city for a year and come up with how to kill Intel.
Yes.
Is that, do you advocate more sort of separating these think tank or these kind of things out, or keeping them well within the day-to-day business?
Yeah, I'm going to probably temper an answer, but more because of experience. I used to say, yeah, man, you got to hive that off. You got to get it away from the mothership so the mother doesn't kill the child and, you know, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah.
And then I went through one of those cycles and I thought, whoa, actually, you know, that's no good for the company and for the culture inside there. And it also creates big chasms and divides, cultural divides. And that. So I'm not convinced on that outright. I wonder if the better answer is it depends on the company and it depends on the circumstances.
Okay. Yeah.
If there's a massive opportunity and you've got a lot of validation that says we have to act on it, but our core business is pointing that way and this thing is that way, we need to break off a piece and have a go at that. Okay. All right, so that might make sense.
Yeah.
I would say if it's less clear and it's actually a little bit more ambiguous, we've got something that's working, but we can already see disruption in our sales cycle, or you know that the seasons are running down. We're not actually doing that well season on season. Then you might want to actually inject some vigor and rigor into the core operation, and then look for the opportunity. You know, to have the business be more sensitized to its marketplace that it's operating in, and develop and cultivate those opportunities, which you then might want to break off a piece and quickly capitalize on, and maybe bring that back. So but there's a whole bunch of questions around how you'd set up the governance. These are not easy answers, by the way. A lot of companies are still trying to figure this out. Companies that are adopting in-house accelerator programs. You know, they put staff through this thing, and then the big question is, well, what happens to that staff member when they're, you know, 3-6 months later they've had this sort of startup jolt? Do they come back in and try to take their old job? You know, or do we leave them out there with the spin-out thing? Are they the best person to grow a company? You know, they might have been the best person to solve the problem, but are they the best person to develop a market? You know, that product market fit, that solution market fit.
I'm sure
so there's a
that's
whole bunch
challenge,
of questions in there, you know. I would say it's not a trivial answer, and I would suggest that because most of it is guesswork, the most effective strategy I would suggest is to try something small scale and learn as fast as you can, take it in iterations and see if through iterations the right model for your business will emerge. Okay, hybrid, in-house, out-house, that sort of thing.
Yeah, right. Can you tell us a little bit about Agile methodology, how you would define it, and how sort of practically you implement it or work within businesses to bring that
sure,
to life?
I can give a sort of one-liner, but I wondered if I could get a quick show of hands. Who's really familiar with Agile as a concept? So I've got sort of less than, maybe 25-30% of the room. Could you guys do with just a short sort of 1 minute, 2 minutes sort of in a nutshell? So one of the best working definitions that I use is Agile is a method for delivering customer value early and often. All right? It's actually, I wouldn't say method, I would say mindset. You've got to cultivate a bit of a mindset in your business that focuses on customer value and then aims to whatever you're doing, whatever your delivery model is, it wants to deliver value early and often rather than late in big batches. So I think that's one sort of starting point. As an example, who watches The Block NZ?
My kids do.
Anyone familiar with The Block NZ? Show of hands. Okay, more than half the room. Is that enough? I think that's a really good analogy for Agile. There's a friend of mine, Nick Williamson, shared it with me. He says, hey, you know, if you watch The Block, and I'm guessing he does, I don't. But he says, you know, you get these sort of teams competing and they've got to renovate a house. But instead of renovating the whole house all in one go, what do? One room at a time, don't they? But what happens in that one room at a time? They renovate the room. They kind of learn about what the judges really are looking for. They learn about what success is. They win or lose, you know, based on the results of the two rooms going to get compared to each other, popularity contests and that kind of thing. And they use the learnings and they apply the learnings. They get better at renovating rooms. And they go and apply what they've learned to the next one and the next one. And before you know it, they've done all 7 rooms or whatever it is and the backyard and everything else and the house. But you can almost plot their competence journey throughout the journey, right? And most of them aren't well versed at doing reality show renovations, right? So it's being able to be dropped into a relatively new problem domain, but very quickly make sense of it and derive a delivery model that delivers value. So I think, is that a helpful example for Agile? It's about biting it off in small pieces, learning it, delivering a bit of a result that you're delivering value, customer value, it's great. At the same time, you're also putting a learning loop in. You're looking very carefully. Because that squiggly line? Oh, did I do the squiggly line thing? There we go. That squiggly line sort of thing on that exploring side. Agile methods are really tuned in and designed to help with that meandering path. Because you actually there is no linear answer to the problem. Well, maybe we need to do things in bite-sized pieces and surface the method, surface the picture with a few data points. And that's kind of how it works. Are there any questions about that? Does anyone sort of want the difference between Agile and Lean? Because they often go hand in hand.
Yep, that'd be great.
So Lean is more about eliminating waste and optimizing yield, all right? So one of the good examples of ways of thinking that for me is chefs, right? There's the chef that's got to make up a menu that night, all right? They've maybe in a new restaurant, new district, got new customers, and he might sample and try out new recipes, but he has to make it up on the fly. He also has to know, what's the ingredients, what's seasonal. So he's got a whole bunch of variables. But his method is he's built up a lot of experience because that kind of goes from knowledge to wisdom. He knows that I'm not going to use tomatoes in a fruit salad. I'm going to boil eggs and I can do some fancy things, and he can make up a recipe on the fly. Learn from that, make up the recipe, and go back to the drawing board. Maybe tomorrow night we'll have another go and we'll tweak that and change that up a bit. So that's more like Agile. All right, you don't have the recipe. You need to find one really quickly. Keep experimenting with your recipe until it yields the best result. Lean is the other way around. It says, hey man, we're a fast food joint. We do 5 things here. We do them really well, right? And they've got the recipe, but they've learned how to optimize and trim the course, trim everything for that recipe. All right, so the sort of textbook answer for what Lean is it's a mindset again. It's a lens that you look through at your business with, and it says you're looking through the lens through the eyes of a customer at your business, and you're asking yourself, so what? You're examining every single process in your business, and you're saying, from the mind of a customer, why would a customer care about whatever it is that I'm looking at?
Right.
Do you know?
Yep.
So why do the dockets need to go on the pallet on this side? Why would a customer care about that? Maybe they don't. Then that becomes the question, is that a form of waste? Can we trim that so that that actually adds value to the process of getting it to a customer? It might be superfluous. And a lot of businesses, I don't know about you guys, but it's actually very difficult sometimes to see what's waste. Is that Raymond Rubicon comment about advertising? I think he was one of the execs on the Coca-Cola project. It's the 80s now. And he said, "Oh yeah, I've got $30 million that I put towards this advertising budget, and I know 80% of it doesn't work, and I know 20% of it works, but I don't know which 20%. So I have to spend the 30 million, right?" And sometimes as a business, you're kind of caught in this trap of like, we've just got to do that, but actually, is there some waste in there that you can limit? So that's the difference between Lean and Agile. Agile, you don't have the recipe. You've got to find a recipe that works in that problem context. Lean, you've got a pretty good idea of a recipe, and it's about eliminating the waste out of that recipe.
Okay. And so a key part of the benefit of Agile, an Agile mindset within a business is the continuous learning, I imagine. Must be difficult, or how have you managed making sure that the business learns and not just the people that are in the pod that are doing the specific project? Because there's one thing doing an Agile process, another thing making a business Agile.
Hey, do you want a job? No. Oh, mate, it's a challenge, isn't it? I think for us, because we're positioned as coaches, we're helping other people shine. So we're trying to give them a platform, all right, to be respected on. It takes guts to try something new, and the risk of failure, especially if you're inside some of the big corporate environments that you're in. It's not always kind to people that are trying something new, right?
No, I bet,
So you've got to create the right environment around that, and that's leadership. Isn't it? That's like Tony Say from Zappos. He gives this great story about leadership, and he says, and I think it applies for the 21st century. It kind of lends itself to a lot of this divide. Old world view of leadership is, imagine you've got a greenhouse and lots of plants in the greenhouse. Well, you've got to be the tallest plant, right? Set an example for all the other plants. You've got to biggest, tallest plant, strongest, all the other plants look up to you. That's the old worldview of leadership.
Yeah.
He says, well, maybe a different worldview of leadership is to be the greenhouse architect. All right, make sure that there's an environment for all the plants to prosper. And you create these sort of safe environments for this. And this is where the word sort of servant leadership come from. It's this idea of creating the environment for which that is rewarded.
Yeah.
Because companies need to see that, I guess, you need to bring that kind of fitness into your business.
Yeah. Yeah, and creating that environment, is that something you've done a bit of? Like it must be, part of it will be implementing systems.
It's probably one of the big focus areas for our coaching engagement is we'll work with the exec to help them understand and separate out, yes, under the soldier worldview, that's absolutely relevant. What we need to do is separate out and just create one little bit of air cover. We call it vertical slice. We'll get a bit of an exec support, a sponsor, somebody that can oversee and really guide quite carefully what happens underneath. And we get a team mobilized and, a scout team. So this is not a soldier team. They're not there to go and take that market. They're there to go and test that market. And, binoculars, go and sample that future and bring the results back, and then he needs to make sense of it, or she needs to make sense of that, and then fold that and see how that folds into their wider strategy. So it becomes an asset and a service to the exec, rather than a liability or a risk that they have to stifle.
Okay, great. I've just got a question here. Could you give an example of how you've helped innovate/turn around an existing business and how it's now changed the way they work?
Yeah, I think one example that's being studied at the moment is a little, well, I'd say little, but in New Zealand terms, it's a sizable chemicals company called Exxon, IXOM. And we met Exxon through a workshop about 2 years ago, well, about 18 months ago now. One of those companies that has enjoyed a really dominant market position in their sector, and, started to get those questions back from some of their main clients. What value are you adding, to this? And being the kind of responsive culture, the leadership had the kind of foresight and appetite to go, well, we need to take that question really, really seriously. And so we got to talking. They engaged Callaghan Innovation, and Callaghan's sort of been supporting them in a lot of different ways, and our program was brought in to help them out.
Right.
So that's the one that's being most studied right now. We've got it. I think Callaghan's busy putting together a bit of a breakdown on the actual figures and outcome and whatnot. But we spent a year with their internal teams. And I guess as an example, we taught them how to use a 1-month market opportunity experiment. So this kind of idea of taking a small cross-functional team within their business and go to the farm gate or go to the sort of factory gate and go and understand that problem context a little bit more. So we talk about design thinking, bringing that sort of customer experience sort of side, go and understand your problem domain really well. But, we put it on time boxes, so time limits. So you've got, sprint, kind of go and get an appreciation as best you can. Quickly bring that round. Make sure you can actually solve the problem that you've detected and that you think is valuable. And then from there, well, you've got problem-solution fit, but what would be the operational or the commercial model that would actually bring that to life? So we bring 3 dimensions to the case. I actually got one of the slides just to kind of help illustrate. That's the sort of formula that we were applying there for the market opportunity experiment. So it brings customer experience. It's like a tripod. You can't have it without one of the legs missing, right? You've got to have all 3 legs, so customer experience, business model, and product development.
Yeah, right.
So in the end, they had, now their traditional way of doing these things is somebody's got a bright idea. Has anyone heard of a HIPPO opinion?
I heard it yesterday and someone else talking.
Highest paid opinion in the room?
Yep.
Right, so most innovation comes from the highest paid opinion in the room. Oh, I've got a bright idea, but okay. Yeah, fine. So that was what a lot of companies, and this company was no different. They had elements of that, somebody really senior, passionate about something, and then deploys a big bet on that. All right, 18 months later, they've got a deployment, and, it's a success. Actually, well, let's unpack, let's forensically analyze that. And so they reflected very strongly on this, is long before our time, and really wanted to do it differently. So we applied this market opportunity experiment philosophy to this idea, which had very likely would follow the similar track as the old one. But within a month, they were able to confidently kill it, with real data. And there were 3 or 4 really good reasons for why they wanted to do that, you know.
Right.
And apparently, I have this as anecdotal, but the learnings that they took from the one week of 1 month, because they got out of the building and spent time with the customer, actually yielded other opportunities to add value. So there's a bit of spin out over there, and this is getting documented as we speak.
Yeah, right. And have new kind of, are they a changed company since you've been in there?
I think so. Yeah, they've moved to Newmarket. They've got fresh new offices and everything else. There's a much fresher perspective inside. There's a lot more rigor. They're also a lot more confident.
Right.
So when they've got an opportunity, they've got a method they can deploy.
Yeah.
So we called it the Exxon way. This is part of our coaching approach, is to go, hey, listen, you can be inspired by all these things outside your business, but you need to cultivate your internal delivery model. And so for Exxon, we called it the Exxon way. So so that became a little knowledge wiki, a Wikipedia, what I know. So we generated an internal company, what I know.
Yep.
And so it's more like what we know. And so these teams, as they were learning things, were like, whoa, this worked really well for customer experience. This worked really well for business model. Here's a template you can reuse.
Yep.
So now you can imagine, as you drop ideas in, you've got a working delivery model that is already proven in context. You've also got staff that have engaged with that, that are familiar and they're confident and they can turn around a result for you relatively quickly.
Yep. Yep.
So you end up with the ability to experiment, pretty substantial, detailed experiments,
Yep.
many times a year, not just one big bet in a strategy cycle.
Yeah, fantastic. Another question here. Being a big fan of Agile, I'd hopefully never end up back in a waterfall environment. Why do you think some businesses are so adverse to moving from waterfall to Agile?
That's a complicated answer. I think there's a common perception that this is the way to manage risk, is to strip risk out of whatever things we're doing. And I think we're seeing a shift. So, another sort of factor that I see in the ecosystem is that 8 years ago when we got here, the term wasn't really that familiar. It was a relatively new thing practiced by a bunch of software developers off in a corner, and it hadn't really made its way out, and people weren't really familiar with it. So with that, you often get, most epidemics don't happen in a big wave; they happen in waves. They happen in cycles. So I think it's been surging and receding for the last sort of 10, 20 years. Agile has its origins about 35 years ago.
Okay.
So it's not a new concept. It's just taking time to kind of move in, and it's a difficult concept to adopt and appreciate.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a solid understanding of what that is, why would you move from the formula you've got that you? Yes, it's not the best result, but you know it. It's that $30 million thing, right? Yes, I know it works. I know 20% of it works, but I don't know which 20%. So I'm going to keep using what I'm using.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's part of the anchoring.
Yeah.
At the moment, though, we are seeing a fundamental shift in the way companies deal with initiatives and getting responses turned around to market. I'm using my words carefully. Mainly because, and the biggest shift, I don't know if you guys will agree with me, is a shift away from project mentality. All right? So we're seeing a move away from project portfolios, project management, projects. The word project sort of invokes big batch size risks. You kind of take risks on in bigger chunks.
Yeah.
And we're seeing companies start to really shake that up. Westpac in particular are moving away from a project portfolio and more to a product service value stream portfolio. So they have continuous flow of value to customers,
right?
Which means that for the project management as a discipline, it starts to reduce the dependence on project management as a way to get things to market, and it creates more emphasis on cross-functional, longer-running squads or teams.
Yeah, right.
So we're seeing a shift away.
A shift. It's interesting, isn't it? Your comment that Agile's been around for 35 years, and that exponential curve. I think I mentioned digital 3D printing had been around for 35 years. I wonder whether Agile is about to reach that tipping point where, all of a sudden it's so much more effective and everyone starts using it. Yeah. Okay, so just to finish off, I'll take some more questions if anyone's got any, but just to finish off, what would be just a couple of practical tips or advice for people who are looking to start being more agile or implement that sort of thinking and mindset, or just to go back to their businesses tomorrow and start doing things a wee bit differently? What would you say to them?
I would suggest really reflect on this idea of scout versus soldier and take a look at your business through those eyes and see what kind of activities are going on and look at the environment that you're in. I think customer experience would be the first one that I would suggest you get tapped into. Understand what kind of experience your customers are having with your brand.
Right. Yep.
And if we define customer experience just for a second, it is the sum of all interactions with your brand. All right? So think about that. It's much broader than just the sale or the complaint. It's every single interaction with your brand, all right? So, Samsung's enjoying this right now, right? There's a lot of people reading headlines around that. Or there's, Apple is enjoying this right now, or Spark, So it's every single interaction with the brand, no matter where it is. So that kind of really broadens out the space that you operate in. So get really into that. I think customer experience is a strong theme to bring into your business. And it's, get curious, read articles, share, pose questions. Get more touch points with your customer base and your market that aren't directly sales related. All right, so there's different ways of doing that. Meetup groups and whatnot. The startup community is a great way to do that. Is to get cross sections of your market base without having to do. You don't colour the conversation with, "No, I'm not trying to tell you something. I'm not trying to sell you. I'm actually trying to learn and appreciate and understand your environment." So get out of your business. So scout mindset. I think that a lot of companies are stuck in a change cycle. It's like perpetual change, constant restructuring, constant reorganizing, everyone nodding along. It's, oh man. And I think that one of the things we need to build in our businesses is the ability to change, not necessarily change. So I think if you're going to start anywhere, start to look at ways that you can make your business changeable, not necessarily change just for change's sake, right? So that means, take a look at the Agile lexicon, look at that sort of tools and mindset thing. A lot of that is very applicable to general business. We're seeing marketing companies, we're seeing chemicals companies. That chemical company uses Kanban in their chemistry lab and as a way to turn around results really quickly.
Right.
So there's a lot of different things you can apply, but that then enables your business to be more changeable. That means if priorities change or things happen and you need to respond really quickly, you've got tools and techniques and things in place, confident people that can pivot and change with that. So making your business changeable and double the rate of learning. Would be the sort of third thing, is whatever's happening. If your rate of learning at the moment is 0, no, we just do everything this way. Then run a little experiment. Maybe have a little lunchtime catch up with a few people that might want to do things differently. Is anyone sort of curious about this sort of thing?
Yeah.
Well, is there an experiment we could generate between us that could maybe yield a different insight?
Yeah.
We're worried about the way we deliver this to the farm gate. Well, what if we got a small group of us and just see if we could come up with a few different ways of doing that. See if we can solve that pain point.
Great.
So those are kind of some of the tips, I guess.
Okay, that's great. Are there any other questions on the floor for Colart? If not, I can wrap up. Did you want to share any of your pictures with us? Any of your art?
Pictures like this one. This is quite a popular one.
It's a good one. Did you do that?
I didn't do it. No, I got it from somebody else. But it's again sort of to that point of delivering value to customers early and often. So this is a good way to frame up the.
Right.
Has everyone heard of this sort of term of MVP, minimum viable product?
Yeah.
All right. This is roughly the philosophy behind it. A lot of businesses try to do it in that top line way.
Yeah, right.
And that's more like a waterfall approach, but
Okay.
Agile will be more like this. This is the Driving Innovation program by Callahan. It's available on the website, and that's our company there.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. Well, look, we'll bring it to a close. I think, Colart, that advice at the end around, really understanding your customer experience and how people engage with your product or service, and then becoming a scout and trying as many different things as you can, doubling the rate of learning. If you're learning a little bit now, make sure you're learning a whole lot more. Try things. Really valuable. And I think intuitively, probably a lot of us think, yeah, of course, that's the way to do things, but probably not many of us are actually doing it as much as we'd like. So hopefully this is going to prompt a bit more, different ways of behaving within businesses. So thank you very much for your time. Please join me in thanking Colart.
Thank you.
So guys, feel free to stick around, have another coffee, connect with people. Please send us feedback via the mobile app and site that I mentioned earlier today. and there are more talks coming up today, so do feel free to come back if you'd like to be even more inspired than you already are. Thanks again for your time. Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.